We are now talking to content manager of IDP Guys Fantasy Football, Joey the Tooth Haggan. What's going on, Joey?
What's going on, fellas? Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, man. How are you and your family doing with this pandemic?
Pretty good for the most part. I mean, me and my wife we swapped our hours around at work, so we don't have to send our daughter to daycare. We have a 10-month-old daughter. Like, my wife was literally in labor when this pandemic broke out. They told us we can't have any visitors, and we were just like, oh, okay, that's how it's going to work, huh? So that was pretty crazy. So my daughter doesn't know any bit of normalcy yet in her life. It's pretty much just pandemic.
Well, it's crazy. This has been a crazy year. A lot of Americans. We have a new president who we talk about the inauguration, whatever. I can't pronounce it, but we have a new president coming into office at the end of the week, which it's crazy. Hopefully, moving forward, we can start banding together again as a country and move forward and not be against one another, because I think it's just been absolutely crazy. That's why we don't talk politics on this network. That's
100%.
But tell us a little bit about your fantasy show and what you do with the content as the content manager of IDP Guys in Fantasy.
All right. With IDP Guys, we usually have about 5 or 6 weekly articles during the regular season. What I do is I make sure everybody's got their stuff on a timeline. When their articles are finished, I bring it straight to Twitter and other social media outlets, and I make sure their content gets seen. They get the clicks so people can get their content out there. I'm out there. I get my own show, the IDP Update, that I go on and I do just a weekly show, injury report, who was hot, who wasn't, the top waiver pickups for the week, and I just do a quick 30 minutes in, out, precise, and just go.
Well, I am a fantasy guy, and I usually play a lot of football fantasy. I'm usually in 3 or 4 leagues. This year, I decided with the whole Black Lives Matter and what all these different organizations did, I decided not to play fantasy just for the sake of this year. I took a step back with fantasy. So one question I have for you, were you surprised with Tom Brady's fantasy position this year, as well as he played in the second half of the season? Or were you not surprised going to Tampa Bay and with the offensive ability that he had with all the different wide receivers he had that he hasn't had with the Patriots?
No, I wasn't surprised at all. I mean, he's shown slight decline. I mean, obviously his arm still is pretty weak. I was never really a huge fan of his arm in the first place, but he was always an underneath guy. You give him targets like Chris Godwin, who can line up all over the line. You have Mike Evans, who's your huge red zone threat. And then you add Antonio Brown to the mix, who can line up all over. And then you have even Scotty Miller. Scotty Miller at the beginning of the season was Tom Brady was a big fan of his. He kind of reminds him of that Julian Edelman type player. And then you also bring in Gronkowski. It's like a level of comfort for Tom Brady. So you give him all those weapons plus a good running game, which he didn't really have that often in New England. Like, he did, but he didn't really have one guy or two guys that were dominant. And Ronald Jones this season was actually quite dominant. And then Leonard Fournette just recently has been dominant. So it takes a lot of that pressure off of Tom Brady. And the offensive line has been good. So you give Tom Brady a good offensive line and he always produces. And then Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and Antonio Brown. I mean, it's kind of a no-brainer.
So you actually have a big emphasis with rookies. You do a lot of rookie analysis with each NFL draft, particularly for dynasty football leagues, but again, also for all the research in general with that. So we're entering a very fascinating draft year with Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields, probably the two highest, like as a collective group, touted quarterback prospects we've seen. So fantasy wise, like what situations do you think would be the best for them? Can you see Lawrence probably going to Jacksonville? What do you think his fantasy value would be? And Fields, it's kind of an unknown. Could he go to the Jets? Could he go to Atlanta? Could a team trade up for him, like a team like Carolina, which I think he would strive in tremendously? What do you think of those kind of expectations from a fantasy perspective, especially with a lot of good quarterbacks?
Fantasy perspective, Lawrence going to Jacksonville, I think is fantastic. So what they're doing in Jacksonville is great. So they already have James Robinson, who's number one is super cheap because he was an undrafted free agent. So I believe he was a top 5, top 6 fantasy running back. So you have him. Here's your young core. You have Trevor Lawrence, now your young quarterback. DJ Shark, he's proven to be a good wide receiver. I don't think he's a wide receiver 1, but he's a good wide receiver. He's a 1,000-yard receiver. Then you have on the defensive side of the ball, you have Josh Allen, you have Caleb on Chason, who had a tough rookie season, but moving forward, he should be a little better. Joe Schobert, Miles Jack, and then they need to address the secondary a little bit, but there's a good young core group of guys. And you bring in Urban Meyer, who is now going to bring culture to Jacksonville, hopefully. But you bring in Urban Meyer, and then you bring in you have 5 draft picks in the first 3 rounds and 11 overall in this draft for Jacksonville. So honestly, if they can add to the offensive line a little bit, give him another target, I think Trevor Lawrence can thrive in Jacksonville.
As you guys know, we are talking to content manager of IDP Guys Fantasy Football, Joey the Tooth Haggan. Now, Joe, I watch a lot of football, and I know a lot of Jet fans have attacked the New York Jets organization this season because they won that game, and they actually won 2 games, and screwed their chances of getting Trevor Lawrence. But moving forward in this coming draft at number 2, what are your thoughts on where the Jets should go? Should they trade down? Should they draft Sewell at number 2? Do they trade down, try to add to their draft stock in their first 3 rounds? I think they have 5 picks in the first 3 rounds. Where do you see the Jets going at this pick?
Trade back. Definitely trade back. I mean, there's you could even the Bengals might move forward to get Sewell because the Bengals want Sewell, but definitely trade back. Sam Darnold, I have faith in Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold looked good 2 years ago. Adam Gase is poison. I'm sorry. I can't stand Adam Gase. And he looked like he was ruining Sam Darnold. But at the end of the season, the team somewhat seemed to come together. And I don't think that had anything to do with Adam Gase. But to see him gone, then you bring in Robert Saleh. I'm a Niners fan, so I hate seeing him go. I'm a Niners fan. Like, I love seeing his passion on the sideline, and he can even bring in maybe some of that little bit of, I know he's a defensive guy, but that offensive mentality that he gets from Coach Shanahan. Shanahan is a nice offensive guru, and if he can just learn a couple of those things, like the jet sweeps or the slants, just the short routes that Sam Darnold can thrive in, he's already got some of the receivers to do that with. Jamison Crowder. He had a great start of the season. He had a great year the previous year with Sam Darnold. Huge chemistry there. Denzel Mims coming in. He's going to be in year 2. He showed some great promise at the end of the season here. And then you trade back. You could trade back to even before 10. You can go like 8, 9. Even if like Carolina wants to move up, grab Justin Fields. You get 9, then you get maybe another second, and then some futures. You're setting yourself up perfectly. You can still grab a offensive tackle and even in the beginning of the second round. There's a couple good offensive tackles late in the second round. And then you can grab another receiver. You can do whatever you want with that first round pick because you don't need to grab a quarterback. Sam Darnold is not bad.
I'm actually glad you brought up the 49ers because it's funny. My next question was dealing with the rookie receivers. And this was a great class of rookie receivers. Justin Jefferson, T. Higgins, you saw play well. CeeDee Lamb, when the Cowboys actually had competent quarterback play, was very good. And your guy, Brandon Ayuk, who was very good this year as well when he was healthy. It's funny because when I was out, my league that I was out of the playoffs in, once because I have Ayuk in that league. Once I was eliminated, I added Kyle Juszczyk and changed my name to Ayushchik, which is just pretty funny. So,
I love it.
Which of those receivers, or even another one that I didn't list, do you think will be the highest drafted in fantasy next year in terms of the upside? And which do you think could be a superstar? Which do you think will be a superstar first in terms of the development?
All right, so who's going to be drafted first and superstar is going to be Justin Jefferson. He's already a superstar. He went for 1,400 yards his rookie season, set a rookie record. Adam Thielen's 32 this year. Stephon Diggs is gone. They don't have another option. It's Justin Jefferson is just going to be just targeted so heavy this coming year. And he's shown he can already deal with it. Like he's dominated the entire NFL on his rookie season. 1,400 yards your rookie season. I mean, come on. That's unbelievable. A couple guys I think who can make a step forward is actually with Jacksonville, Laviska Shenault. Mm-hmm. He showed that he's a guy who can make plays, just get the ball in his hands. And that's going to be kind of the focus for Urban Meyer, I think, to get Trevor Lawrence started. You want to give some of those quick outs, maybe some wide receiver screens, some quick slants, and let Shenault get some yards up to catch, get some yak going. And that's going to bring your confidence with Trevor Lawrence. It's going to just boost Laviska Shenault, and that will get the offense going. So Shenault, I think, is going to be great. T. Higgins, he's going to take over for A.J. Green. Like A.J. Green was gone this year. T. Higgins already did it. He had 600 yards receiving between weeks 3 and 11, I think. And 11 was when Joe Burrow went out. He had 4 touchdowns as well. He had 65 targets during that span. So he obviously showed he has great chemistry with Joe Burrow, and that's going to be a high-powered offense this next year too.
We are talking to content manager of IDP Guys Fantasy Football, Joey the Tooth Haggan. Now, Joey, let's move on to a little basketball conversation. And James Harden gets traded to the Brooklyn Nets. Kyrie Irving is missing in action. I don't know. He's hanging out, not wearing his mask, hanging out on a bus, going out to parties, going out to private parties, whatever he's doing. Were you surprised that the Brooklyn Nets gave up as much as they did to land Harden? And do you think, does this really put Sean Marks in, put him in the seat to possibly getting fired if this doesn't work?
Yeah, I was incredibly surprised considering they just had this failed attempt a few years ago with the Celtics, and you saw how far back that put them. Like, that's where we are now. They finally had a young core, Jared Allen and Karis LeVert. I mean, those two were very good players. LeVert was showing great promise, and they just send him off for a disgruntled veteran who already played with Kevin Durant, and they didn't win a championship. And they had a player like Kyrie Irving and Russell Westbrook who wanted to be the guy. Like, you literally had this same trio, and it didn't work. So now you give up all your draft picks, you give up 2 promising young stars, and you're possibly going to be a top 3 team in the East that's going to lose in the playoffs.